Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Let's Talk Draft. Sitting here with my good friend, Frankie Abbott, at Frankie Films. Make sure you're giving him a follow. Today, we have a really good episode. I'm excited for this. This one's going to just be general draft prep. Draft is coming up. It's literally next Thursday. It's going to be really, really exciting time. This is the most exciting time for me, truthfully. I love the NFL draft. It's my favorite. I love the offseason more than I like the regular season, how stupid it sounds. I'm that guy that gets on Madden and makes my trades sims the whole year and see how they do. That's me. I like that type of stuff, the team building aspect, and we're finally here. But first, Frankie, how are you doing today, my man?
Doing pretty good. Ready for the draft to come around. I saw someone put out a tweet today that was basically like, I would pay real money just to simulate to the draft. I'm sick of all the storylines the cycle's over with. I feel the same way. I feel like, it's just time. There's just going to be a bunch of posturing for teams. I feel like most of the news at this point, as real as it might be, it feels like a lot of it is just kind of teams leaking info to either get their guy to drop or get their guy to be at the selection they want him to be. So I'm ready for the NFL draft. A lot of other sports are pretty fun right now. Brewers are pretty decent, which that's like the first time in my lifetime they're actually like doing pretty well. They just had a good road trip on the road. The Bucks just pulled it back to 1-1, and they're about to do their classic gentleman's sweep of the Heat, the Mike Budenholzer special. Looking forward to that, and then they're probably going to win the NBA Finals because that's just
really
what it's about. It's a classic at this point. Everyone was so worried. I saw so many people talking so much smack. They're like, "Oh man, Milwaukee's going to go down 2-0, and then what are they going to do?" I'm like, okay, like guys, this happens all the time. They lose to the Magic. They lost to plenty of teams. The bullets just bounce off me at this point. I don't care. Michael Budenholzer is going to put up some stinkers, but he's going to adjust, and then Giannis is going to come back and they're going to win the finals. Nuggets looking pretty good too. I heard you went to the game, Joey. How was that?
I went to both games so far. All I'm saying, Frankie, I'm not the type of guy to take credit for this, but the Nuggets are 2-0 when I'm in the building. A funny story.
Start giving you tickets.
I think so. Larry on Twitter said, "Hey, you need to start a GoFundMe," and I agree. I do need to start a GoFundMe. If you are a listener of this podcast, I will drop my Venmo in the comments on Twitter. So make sure you're hitting me up. I mean, hey, let's get these Nuggets to the championship. Send me to every game.
Until proven otherwise, they're doing the team a disservice to not get you there. So please send Joey Richards at JR Drafts to the next Nuggets game, and until they lose all of them.
Jokic is causing problems out there, Frankie. Or more specifically, I know this is a football podcast. I just want to get into this real quick.
It's okay.
Throw that bubble Jamal Murray talk out the window. It's playoff Jamal Murray. That's what it is. It has nothing to do with this bubble like everyone wanted to make it sound, because he got hurt for 2 seasons. We haven't seen him since the bubble in the playoffs, and everyone makes it sound like it was just this one-time thing. No, Jamal Murray has been a good playoff player since he's been in the NBA and since he started going to the playoffs. He's always been that guy, and we're seeing it. Dropped 40 points yesterday. No one could guard him. From the very first minute he stepped on that court, he was giving people problems. MPJ got into foul trouble early. He had almost 0 points going to that fourth and rattled off somehow, I think ending with 16 or 17 points.
Mm-hmm.
The Nuggets are really hard to beat when both MPJ and Jamal Murray are going, because I know what Jokic is bringing. So it turns into a 3-headed monster there, and I'm excited about it.
Yeah.
Hey, I want to meet the Bucks in the finals.
I'm a little worried about it, but I mean it would be messy. And I'll be honest, I mean, I don't know if I've seen the Bucks beat Jokic yet, as crazy as that sounds. I went to probably the best Bucks seats I've ever had. Was Jokic's fastest triple-double ever. It was like back in 2018, maybe 2019. He had it in like 18 minutes of game time. Yeah. He had like a 16, 12, and 11 stat line. It was absolutely ridiculous. They blew out the Bucks, but it was a pretty cool game to watch. Actually, I enjoyed it quite a bit. But so it would be an interesting series for sure. It would probably get a little messy in here. Can't lie.
It would be fun though. 2 players I adore. I love both these guys. But first, let's move on from the basketball talk. This is Let's Talk Draft, a football show with Let's Talk Broncos football. We gotta get into the football stuff here. People are waiting. Draft is literally next week. George Paton and Sean Payton had their press conference today going to the draft, and I thought there were some interesting quotes from there. I thought one thing that really stood out to me was George Payton alluding to that, hey, we don't want to be closed-minded. We will move up if the right player is available, and even went further on that and said they made a list of players they would consider moving up for. So I thought that was a really interesting comment. I don't know, Frankie. What do you make of that? Do you think it's just smoke? I think a lot of this is smoke, personally, with every quote that comes out of
Yeah.
this. Uh, but what would you make? Let's say it's not. What would you make of them moving up? Is there guys that you would move up for?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough, right? Because it really depends upon the player that they pick. The guys that I would really like them to move up for, I'm not sure that they would necessarily need to just because of how much depth there are at some of those positions. Like when you talk about someone in maybe the cornerback class, when you talk about maybe a running back that they might like, which I don't think I would love because of the position, which I don't think I'd love mainly because of the depth that I think they'll be able to achieve on day 3. I don't think it's necessarily something I'd love, but I mean, the other part of it is, it's not necessarily saying he's going to be willing to move up on, the first pick they've got. Maybe he's looking to move up in day 3. I think it's just kind of one of those things. He likes to keep his cards open. George Payton knows how to give off good answers. So that's probably my take on it for sure. If there was one player I'd hope is like, if they have on their board that they could move up for, I'd probably say Keanu Benton right now. I think he's their most like fills a need, a guy I don't necessarily expect to be there, but could maybe slip a little bit. And the defensive, like the interior defensive line, like those 3 techs specifically, not the deepest class for those. You got a lot more guys that are playing on the edge, not a lot of super high-end interior guys. I think he's going to end up being probably like my second or third defensive lineman at the end of this thing, which, we're coming up on. And if he was a guy that ended up slipping into like the 60s and they said, hey, we can give up a little bit more to get him and he'll be a literal starter for this year, shoot, go ahead and do it,
Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree with you. It's just hard for me to imagine. Like, I guess it could work out trading up for a guy. It could. It's just like this Broncos team has depth concerns almost everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
I want darts. I want darts to throw at players. Just because, like, hey, even if that one guy turns out good, you maybe just traded 2 picks, maybe you added future picks in there. I don't think the Broncos should be digging themselves in a deeper hole when it comes to the amount of picks they have. They're already struggling right now, not having anything in the first 2 rounds. Why continue to dig that? It's hard for me to imagine unless like someone that came out of nowhere fell. Anyone that's projected in that range, it's hard for me to be like, yeah, I could validate trading up for them with the circumstances the Broncos are in. Most of the time, Frankie, quite honestly, I'm big on only trading up for quarterbacks. That's a big thing for me.
Yeah.
I really do think that it's the only position where it's like it's that important. It's that important that I nail down this position. And if I really believe in a guy, go get him, because it's like I said, just that important at the end of the day. It's the defensive tackles, the wide receivers, any of these other positions aren't important enough for me to lose picks when you're already in a deficit there. I just can't imagine it being worth it in my mind.
I guess one other thing I'd say too is one thing is I think we need to keep in mind is George Payton is not, his seat has not cooled. I don't think, I think there has been a lot of like, there's a lot of love for Sean Payton right now. There's a lot of love for Denver, but if this season goes south, the first person that's going to be on the chopping block, I think, is probably George. I think George is probably going to be one of the first people in the first couple of years. So when you talk about like already having minimal throws at a dartboard, and I've talked at length about this, about how what can George Payton really do this year to fix his name in Denver, with all these recent warts he has on his resume. He's kind of already spent all of his goodwill getting, Russell Wilson here, and you can say he used his goodwill to get Sean Payton here, but it seems kind of like Sean Payton might be taking over as the commander in chief right now, which is what George Payton was for the last couple of years. So it's interesting when you talk about if they were interested in combining a couple picks and moving up for a guy, that might be George Payton's final swing. You know what I'm saying? Where like if that player isn't like a standout starter, like a successful starter right away, like there you go. Like I think that's really the icing on the cake on the George Payton tenure, where it might be smarter for him, especially where I think part of his claim right now, as at least for the fan base behind him, for at least him, is I am a pretty solid player evaluator. Oh my God, that's coming out horribly. Evaluator. There we go. And I can find good like rotational or startable pieces on day 3. If he's giving up day 3 picks to move up to go get like a day 2 pick, that day 2 pick has all the pressure on him, and it better pay off. So I think that's an interesting part of it as well.
No, it's a fact. It's definitely a fact. It is an interesting part of it. I want to get through these though, so we can get into our draft conversation. Another thing he mentioned was that John Elway will be around. That's something he
Yay.
said. Like he's going to be an asset used. And Frankie, it wouldn't be fun. Like we got to keep the Broncos Illuminati conspiracy theories around. Um, I mean, me personally, John Elway is really the puppet master here. No, I'm kidding. But yeah, it just won't end. It's good. Those GM stuff, all the John Elway stuff is still going to stick around. Do you have any hard feelings about that, or what do you
I
think?
don't really care either way. Honestly, I hope that he's not super duper involved. I don't think he will be. I think that's probably something, again, not to say everything is just GM speak. Probably seems like one of those things they're just saying to kind of appease everybody, the people that want John Elway, but also like don't want him to have an established role. Like, oh yeah, John will be around, like that type of thing. But
Hmm.
we'll see. We'll see. I hope it's not too heavily involved with them if they do have to find a new quarterback after Russell Wilson, I'll say.
Yeah, it's a fact. I mean, like, John always crazy.
Right.
Those years were wild
It's
times,
time to
man.
move on.
Roller coaster.
Hmm.
Never knew. Year to year. Now I think Jerry Jeudy regarding his 5th-year option, George Payton said we like him. He's going to be here. Is what he said. They did not give a definitive answer on if they're going to pick up that 5th-year option. Matter of fact, eluded the question altogether. Yeah, so I don't know. For me, Frankie, that's a little concerning. I would pick up Jerry Jeudy's 5th-year option. I just would. It doesn't make sense otherwise. If to me, he's the best wide receiver on this team, and you can't lose him. He's going to get more than his 5th-year option if he hits free agency. At the end of the day, that's just what I think. What is your opinion there?
Yeah, man. I mean, it's tough. I completely agree that I think they should pick up their deadline or his 5th-year option, excuse me. But it's interesting when you look at that 2024 cap. I mean, it's gonna be a dicey year next year. Where I think again, I've alluded to this before. Like there are going to be some cut candidates that we are not going to want to see next season because of how much money
Yeah.
they're spending on things like the Russell Wilson contract, like the Garrett Bowles contract, like Justin Simmons contract. There's a lot of money that's been pushed onto next year. Where if they say, hey, we can save, I believe it's like a $12 million hit if they pick up the cat or they pick up the 5th-year option for next year for 2024. That could be a route they end up going if they decide they want to end up going a receiver early on to try to get that money to kind of offset a little bit. I'm not a huge fan of it, but it does seem like they're really getting to the point where the 3 receivers that are left are going to be kind of battling it out to see who's going to be the receiver in Denver for the next like 2-3 years. But I mean, it's scary, man. And I mean, it's one of those things where this is kind of when we talk about, man, if this Russell experiment really is a failure, like it's appeared to be throughout year 1, they need to get ahead of this thing and move on from it so they don't end up losing out on a ton of good talent because they have this $50 million albatross every single year and for a couple of years after he leaves. They need to get ahead of that because right now, Russell Wilson has not played a snap where his AA or APV is at $50 million. It's only at like 34 right now because he's still on the Seahawks deal. When that jumps up and he's playing how he is now, or even, maybe a little bit better, it's going to hurt when we're watching guys like Randy Gregory, Justin Simmons, Cortland Sutton not be able to get paid, DJ Jones, where these guys' deals were kind of set up so that we could see. And if by year 2, year 3, it's not working out, we can kind of go into rebuild mode.
Facts, yeah. No, and I agree with that. I mean, it's not. It is a tough time next year. It's not an easy time. It's not an easy time. That's what I tweeted this not recently. It was just that I think that this year, at the minimum, the Broncos are going to be getting a lot of answers. They are. They're going to be getting a ton of answers. Is this the year the Broncos are going to go to the Super Bowl? No. This is the year they're going to be getting a lot of answers on how they should build their team going forward and the direction. This is the direction year. And it's going to help them. These wide receivers, like you said, Frankie, I don't think all 3 of them are going to stick around for like the next 2 years. I don't.
Mm-hmm.
Matter of fact, I think there's a better likelihood that there's only one. There's only
Maybe
one of
not
these
even.
guys left. Yes. So we'll see. Definitely a lot of changes coming. And then the last one, and I'll read this quote directly here. Sean Payton said the Broncos analytics department is great. He says he's like a driver of a new car who is trying to find out how to work everything and can't figure out how to get the seat warmers on. I want to know, does that scare you at all?
That's a little bit of a scary quote. I think we'll definitely be able to tell if like they're bottom of the league in like early down pass rate or something, or their fourth down decisions are like super awful. I don't know, but I don't know. Man, I don't know. Not a great quote. Not something you really want to hear the coach saying within one of his first open mic appearances.
Bro, he makes it. I mean, that was like a quote. It sounds like an old person just trying to figure out the internet or something. Like
Right,
that.
exactly. Like he's just trying to figure out how Gmail works. He doesn't know how like DocuSign's gonna go. Like he's figuring it out as he goes. Doesn't
And
trust
I have
anything.
the utmost faith in Sean Payton. I do, Frankie. I mean, he was my number one candidate this coaching cycle, and for me, it was clear that Sean Payton was the best coach. I have a lot of faith in him, but that quote was wild. That was a wild time listening to that one. It really was. It really, really was.
Yeah.
I want to move on past the pressers, though. I'm done with the pressers. Let's move into the NFL draft. We're 15 minutes into the show. The time everybody is looking for, literally next Thursday. First topic I have, Frankie. And I tweeted about this the other day again. What to you does realistic expectations look like for the Broncos going into this draft? Do you think they should be pulling away, I guess, how many starters out of this draft class? What's realistic here?
As far as for year one, if they can find like I'd say 1 to 2 guys that can be solid rotational to startable players, whether that's a guy you can start right away or a guy that's going to be doing something by the end of the year. And I'm not saying that they have to be elite talents, but I think as we've talked about with the lack of quality depth on this team, with the lack of, I don't know, even some of the positions that don't necessarily have the strongest of players at them that I think could end up sliding. You talk about like center or something like that. I think that they end up needing to find probably 2 to 3 like decent players, whether that's playing on special teams, whether that's, by the end of the year, you're ending up seeing them get snaps and you can see them as a piece you can rely on for year 2. That would be great. I don't want to, oversell it though. This is going to be tough for them to do. Like they don't have a lot of options. They don't have a lot of flexibility. And I think, even saying it now, I'm not saying they need to be solid starters again. But I think they need to find at least 2 to 3 players that can be rotational pieces on this team, whether that's along the defensive line. I think this is a big year where they need to focus on building in the trenches and something, that they kind of did last year, not a year to spend on luxury picks. This is not the year to be looking for the gadget players, for returners, specialists at all, like as silly as that sounds, like this isn't the year to go grab like a 7th-round kicker or something.
Never a year for that. I'll be
as silly as it might sound, this isn't a team that has minimal holes. So you'd rather get something that can end up working out. In the 7th round, if they're picking between a kicker on the board or like a specialist returner, or like a possible, developmental tackle or developmental offensive lineman, give me the offensive lineman every single time for this team because they do not know who is going to be on this roster in 2 years. I don't think they have very many cornerstone players, literally. I think they have arguably one right now in Patrick Surtain. The rest of them, I think it's very hard to project who is really going to be, part of the next great Broncos football team. As much as we might want a lot of these guys to be, it's just hard to really project right now with how downtrodden this team's been for however long. Mm-hmm. What about you? What are your expectations?
I first want to ask you a follow-up question, Frankie.
Okay.
Right? So let's say they walk away, and I'm asking this for a specific reason. It's kind of a trick question. I'm going to have another point on after I ask you this. Let's say they walk away with 2 guys that you think are starters in this draft class, and it after their rookie year. Is this a W of a draft class?
Yeah, I'd probably say so. I guess it kind of depends upon position maybe, but no, I definitely think so. If you're able to get 2 like starters, like 2 guys that say in 2024 we're comfortable saying like, oh yeah, this guy can hold the spot down, or maybe we bring in some competition for him, I think 100%. If you don't have a top, whatever pick it is, top 65 pick.
All right.
What do you think?
Okay, so here's why I asked this, Frankie, because the Broncos did last year, I think, walk away with 2 starters. And I only bring this up because looking at paper on last year's draft class, it's like, hey, this draft class kind of is weak. It's super weak. I think mostly because you don't have a first, and then your last pick was your next pick was the last pick of the 2nd round. That was your earliest pick, was pick 64 with Nick Bonito. And yes, it would have been great if they landed that Nick Bonito and he looked great his rookie year. It would have made that whole draft class look a lot better, in my opinion, if they did that. I just want people's expectations to be real here. I think getting 2 starters would be great out of this, me personally. And I'm wondering if people's expectations are a little too high. I do. Because if we're upset at Damari Mathis, Greg Dulcich draft, and I think a lot of it is just Nick Benito hanging over our head like, hey, this is the reason why this is bad. I don't know. I feel like they're going to be okay because it's not like this year they might have better picks, right? They have pick, what is it, 67, 68, I think is what it is. They have more picks to draft with this year than they did last year in that very specific range. They had pick 64 last year. They have 67 and 68 this year. I don't know. It feels very similar to last year. Now, everyone hates last year's draft class. This one, if we walk away with 2 stars, I think that is somewhat better than I expect.
Yeah, I guess that's completely fair. My only counter would be like last year, George had 9 picks. And I think when you see like 2, I think it's more so that the misses really hurt last year. And I think that's kind of the bigger part of it. Like, I think that so much of the 7th round ended up getting kind of thrown in the dumpster. I think there were kind of, and it's not even like specific players' fault. It's just kind of like, I think there was too much. And I mean, he kind of openly put it on the coaching staff or the guys that helped him make the selections as they happened. So it was kind of like, it seems like he wasn't even really as much in control of his board as he would have liked to have been, or, and it's kind of like, George, then you should step up and do that. Cause like, I don't know, when you talk about the day 3 selections he made, I think those are where really the struggles come in when you talk about having multiple interior defensive linemen. And I think the earlier one of them hasn't really shown much until this point. We talked about Nick Benito having kind of the disappointing campaign. Dellerin Turner Yell is a guy who we've seen perform on special teams, but I don't think I don't even know how many defensive snaps he took last year. I don't believe it was that many. Like where Damari Mathis and Greg Dulcich were hits, yes, and they provide confidence. It's just all the misses. Like, you talk about like Montreal Washington, and you talk about where I think, as stupid as is, and we always talk about how you don't want to draft for positional needs. I think that there is a time and a place. And last year, it was very easy to project some positions that were going to need better depth coming into this season that they just kind of completely passed up when you talk about things like offensive tackle, when you talk about things like the interior positions that, like, I'm not trying to make it sound like the Mike McGlinchey contract is horrible, but you might not be paying the Mike McGlinchey contract $18.5 million if you draft someone like Zach Tom last year, if you draft someone like Braxton Jones, who ended up going in the 5th round to the Bears and ended up having like an okay campaign. The person who went to the Chargers, Jamari Saylor, ended up going in like the 6th round. Like things like that, where you kind of look back and you say, wow, like, I don't want to say it was a bad draft, but there were definitely a ton of missed opportunities. And I think when I talk about somewhere, you're talking about like luxury picks, where it was like, hey, this is a team that just came off of a bad season. Yes, they are getting a new franchise quarterback, but there were so many changes taking place. And yes, it's easy for me to say this in hindsight. I was also on the board. If we have Russell Wilson now, this team's going to win like 13 games. But I think this team was too quick last draft, and we don't want to see this become a routine of we can just draft, whoever we think is going to be this, random niche stud for us. And sometimes you do just kind of go the bread and butter of who's the best at a position we actually will need in the next couple of years.
No, okay. So when you bring it up like that, I totally agree with you. The misses in last year's draft class were really bad. Like, here's the thing. Like, I at least at this point and going into 2nd year, right? They're going into their sophomore campaigns. I should at least be holding out hope for some of these guys that it's like, yeah, you know what? They could turn out to be a good player. It might only be 5% or 10% chance, but they could turn into a good player. What have they done this offseason? I'm intrigued. There is a lot of players in this draft class where I'm like, my little 10% has moved down to like 1% chance of that. And there's even more players where I'm like, I don't, that 5% that you're maybe a starter or a contributor or something like that has moved to 5% that you will be a quality depth player. That's just kind of what it is. The misses are substantial. They are substantial. Montreal Washington being one, draft him as a specialist. He didn't turn out. Owazurike, as you mentioned, what do we expect from Uwazurike this next year?
Right. No, same with like a guy like Feion Hicks. Exactly with Uwazurike. And I mean, it's not even so much Uwazurike because I'm not trying to knock any of these guys specifically. It's kind of like when you take him and then it's the combination of then later you take Matt Henningsen. So now it's kind of like, how is that really going to work out? And it's one of those things where you can kind of foresee that they weren't going to be willing to keep around guys like maybe a Draymond Jones and a Deshaun Williams in the future because they were just kind of drafting so many of these guys' replacements. But then that's kind of an odd maneuver when you're just getting Russ, like just a lot of just like things that I think at the time were kind of obviously like, this is an interesting decision, like I think Dulcich was a good pick and we're all excited about it, but it's kind of like the move up for Javonte Williams. It's a little bit similar where it's like, man, like taking a good, I don't know, using a premium pick on a tight end and having it work out, it just doesn't hit quite like hitting on some of these other positions. It's kind of the same with moving up for the running back. And that's not me trying to take away from anything these guys are as players. These are incredibly talented football players. I love Javonte Williams and Greg Dulcich. This is me saying it's a little bit harder for me to count some of these guys as like hits when like if you're going to draft a tight end or a running back and, in the running back's case, move up to do so, they better be like elite, not just like good. And I think Javonte Williams can be elite, but we also have the injury now, so it's going to be very interesting to see how he's able to rebound from that. Greg Dulcich, I think he can be very good. He also dealt with injuries last year. And when we talk about he was a good tight end, I don't think he was necessarily an elite tight end. And this is a guy that is playing a position that is one of the hardest developmental curves in the NFL. So who knows if he'll be able to like fully produce on that rookie contract like we need him to.
No, and I agree with you. I totally agree. Moving on, I want to move. We talked a little about last year's draft and relating it to this one. Who are some really exciting players you watched this year, Frankie? This is just kind of a fun question.
Just most exciting players?
The most enjoyable players you felt like you watched this year? And tell me a little why you enjoyed them so much.
I'm going to first go Tyjae Spears because I've been hyping up Tyjae Spears so much and I just enjoy his game. I love how he cuts. He runs super hard. He's just an incredibly elusive runner who does it all out of the backfield. Very fun, like compact style back. Almost reminds me of like a Doug Martin type, maybe a little bit slimmer, but just like that type of just like bowling ball type of nature, but also has such elusive cuts. Dwayne McBride's another guy that me and you both enjoy. He's just front flipping out there. He's just running over people. He looks like an NCAA 14 created player that you just made like 6'5", 240 pounds. He's like Brandon Jacobs, like fumbles. He has more career fumbles than catches. I saw that today, which made me laugh a little bit. So, there's definitely some concern. He will end up probably being a day 3 pick, but if you were to tell me that guy ended up next year having like 1,000-yard season on some team and just going absolutely ballistic on the ground, wouldn't shock me in the slightest. Wouldn't shock me at all because he's just that type of runner. Will McDonald has been one of my favorite players forever just because he shows such explosive stuff off the edge. Really good bend from him. I'll throw BJ Ojolari into that mix as well just because he has such fun tape and throws such fun things. So there's a lot of fun moves at the guys he's facing off against. And then I'll also go, I loved Xavier Hutchinson's tape. Xavier Hutchinson just does everything I really like and was just beaten up on the Big 12. So I'll say Xavier Hutchinson. How about you? Who were the most exciting players you've watched this year?
All right. Well, I have to give shine to my guy, Cedric Tillman. He is my favorite. If I have my guy red dot player that I'm just higher on than everybody else, it's Cedric Tillman. He is, to me, people are so much lower on him than I am. I really have him at like wide receiver 2 in this draft. I really do. And you know what? It's super bold, but I'm going to stand by it because I never do in these draft things. People convince me out of it. I'm just going to stick on it. I think where I view him differently, and it's clear from anybody else in this, is I think he's a lot better vertical threat than other people do. That's just my thing. I think there's technique to being a very good vertical threat and stacking defensive players up and being able to beat people deep. And I'm not just talking about 50-50 balls. He wins them at the catch point. I'm talking about him beating players deep. He's getting open deep. He's damn good at it, in my opinion. I think that's what separates him. He kind of reminds me of like a T. Higgins, right? T. Higgins is a guy in the NFL that does that really, really, really well, despite not being the fastest. He runs a 4.5 something guy. I think Cedric Tillman is in that same vein, and it's not going to shock me at all if Cedric Tillman is one of the best, if not the best, wide receiver coming out of this draft class. That's just, I'm just going to stand on that. That's my opinion.
So let me ask a follow-up. So I think a lot of people will probably have Quentin Johnson as the number one X receiver in this class, but I think I'm kind of where you are, where I think Cedric Tillman is probably the best at that position. Would you take Cedric Tillman right now over Quentin Johnson if you had the selection and needed a receiver for your young quarterback or something?
That's a slam dunk for me. Yes, because so you're both going to be able to make the argument that they're raw, but in two different ways, right? So in Cedric Tillman's case, a lot of the negative is going to be the offense he came out of, right? It's going to be that gimmicky Tennessee offense where he doesn't have much of a route tree. Can he run routes? Can he get open? What I see from Cedric Tillman is I think he has the ability to, where Quentin Johnson has a lot of stuff, right? It's his hands, super inconsistent. He's going to go up there and win some at the catch point for sure, but he also is dropping them quick slant right in front of his face, balls pop off the hands on the ground. He also doesn't have much of a route tree. Like there's a lot going on with Quentin Johnson where it's like Cedric Tillman, it's more of a clean cut. I know what you're good at least. I can rely on you winning at the catch point. I know you're big. I know you have good hands. And me personally, I think you're going to be a really good vertical wide receiver. For Quentin Johnson, I'm more so banking on what I think he could be rather than what I've seen on film.
It's funny too, because a lot of people will, label Quentin Johnson as this alien freak athlete, but Cedric Tillman's right there, dude. Cedric Tillman is also an absolute freak. He's like 6'3", 200 plus pounds. He's got the really good explosive numbers all over the place. So I'm completely with you, man. I think Cedric Tillman offers you more diversity and the routes he's able to run. Like you said, I see him fighting for passes a lot more. So much of the issue with Quentin Johnson is he's supposed to be this big receiver, but he really does not play like it. He does play like it's semi after the catch, but like as far as when the ball's in the air, he kind of doesn't. And it's frustrating at times where, you'll see him on one drive make a really nice extended over the shoulder grab, but then you'll also see he lets so many passes get into his chest and lets them bounce off. And that's just not really what you want to see out of a guy that's supposed to be the number one receiver. So right there with you, Cedric Tillman. I'm a little over him on Quentin Johnson. That's probably the hot take of the show right there.
It is. I have him much over his teammate too. I'm not a big Jalen Hyatt guy. I'll be honest with that.
Hyatt's so weird. He feels like he's just going to be the speed guy this year that everyone falls in love with. And I mean, he's probably a guy that's going to end up going like top 20, top 25 purely because of that Alabama tape. And I'm with you where I get it and I see it, but I'm also kind of like,
When you start adding up all the concerns there, it's like, oh damn. They're like, these are not just like, it's not just like one. We have like 2 or 3 major issues going on here. Mm-hmm. I have it where it's like, okay, is he just a straight line speed guy? How is he going to translate as a route runner? Coming out of the same issue as Tillman, right? I mentioned that Tillman thing, or it's like he's coming out of that Tennessee offense. He's beating people in the slot all the time, where it just feels like none of these guys in college football are physically able to match up with him out of those nickel DBs. Like he was just dominating people. It's not going to be the same way in the NFL. It's just not.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm not a big.
It's one of those things for me too, where I think you can, like, if you're so interested in getting this like over the top threat that's really going to, limit what defenses can run against you, like wait a little bit and get someone like Tyler Scott out of Cincinnati. Wait a little bit and get someone like Tank Dell out of Houston. These are still the guys that run sub 4.4s, sub 4.35s, stuff like that, where it's like, I don't think that the difference is big enough there just because this is like quote unquote a big name who, like, again, so much of it just seems to be that he torched Alabama in a somewhat weaker Alabama than we're really used to, that I'm just kind of like, man, I don't get it. I completely agree with you where I don't really get the Jalen Hyatt like super love, where it seems like he could be a top 20 pick at this point.
It does, Frankie. And here's another thing I have. I worry about the guys. Okay, so if you're going to be straight line speed guy, to me, you also have to be physically imposing. It feels like we have these guys come out all the time where these straight line speed guys and everyone falls in love. It's like, because in college football, they're bombing over the top and they're winning over the top, whatever the case may be. How many of them work out in the NFL? Like, seriously, how many of them? It's like Robbie Anderson, Chosen Anderson, right? Is his name now, is the comp that I would put out there for a Jalen Hyatt. Somebody like that. That would be a productive wide receiver, but nothing over the top. You need to, if you're going to be 6 foot tall, and be that fast guy, you also have to be quick in and out of your cuts. And I just don't see it from Jalen Hyatt. I don't see it. I don't see it. Like I want, if you're going to be that straight line speed guy, give me DJ Chark. Like it's 6'4". That physically. That's that one. I want to ask you though, Frankie, are there any, and this wasn't on our thing, I'm going off topic here a little bit. Give me a player, because you've been doing the draft for a few years now for sure and deep into it. I've been following your work for a little bit now. Frankie, who are you early on? And then, because as a draft analyst, I always felt like I got some early on some guys, and then right before the draft, they climbed the boards all the way up. Is there anyone that you were really early on?
Yeah, I mean, I'll go first and say our guy Darnell Wright. It was very funny and fun watching this year. This has been probably one of my favorite like watchings of a prospect this entire draft season. Is, man, beginning of the year, I was flipping through the games I had on, the dark drive of college football film I have that no one is allowed to access. But I had Tennessee tape, and I was like, all right, what prospects? Anytime I have a team, I'll just type up like who's their seniors, who's their eligible players that they got. I was looking at Hendon Hooker, I was watching Hyatt, and I was watching just this random offensive tackle that was projected to go in like the 3rd, 4th, 5th round. I got through about 2 games, and I watched him put many people in the dirt before I said, this looks like a 1st-round pick. I might be missing something here. And sure enough, now we're in kind of deep into the draft season. Once it hit January and, NFL playoff games started ending, teams started getting knocked out. We had some of the bigger NFL names start doing their draft prep. And sure enough, Darnell Wright started to fire up draft boards. You cannot show me a 2022 offensive tackle who has better tape than Darnell Wright. He is truly a success story that of the Frankie's film eye that I can really look back on and say, I hope that guy really ends up being like a first ballot 10-year right tackle for some franchise, because we were there first. Shout out Darnell Wright. I can't wait to see what he does in the league, as long as it's not in the AFC West against Denver.
Off that, I hate the little lazy narrative going around about him. That's annoying. I never felt like he was lazy watching his film. That was literally never something that came up in my mind, was like, oh, this guy's lazy. I don't know about him. I had that thought about like a Christian Darrisaw at the time, where I thought he was just, why isn't this guy just dominating every single snap in college football? And he came in the NFL and he's proven that he's not. But I've never had that thought.
I think what you're talking about is a perfect example of what we've been saying. We're like, it just feels like a team trying to get him to fall to their number, because like you're saying, like, this is a guy, I was talking with Connor Rogers today earlier on the Irish NFL show. Go check that out. Shameless plug. And what he was talking about how was Darnell Wright was playing the NFL season. He was playing at around like 350. He was probably playing at like 350 plus, which you can see. He was a big boy. Yeah. Senior Bowl, he was down to 340. Combine, he was down to 330. This is a guy that puts in the work, that's willing to, match the body type he's got to be. Cool. I'm sure the laziness can get people are probably factoring that into the fact that it took him until this year really to explode on tape. But I think it's more so that he found his proper position at right tackle and just ended up kind of exploding off the board. And, there's like, it's weird. So many people are trying to pull everything on a prospect to try to get him to drop this week. I've seen people kind of floating around, Darnell Wright might be a head case because like he likes to tag people on Twitter. First of all, that stuff's hilarious. Second of all, he's an offensive lineman guy. Like this is a guy that's getting paid to go whoop ass for like 60 minutes a game. Like my favorite analogy is like, dude, these are guys that get paid to get into like 40 car accidents. Like the amount of like force that they are hitting into each other, it's like a car accident. These guys, like, I'm not trying to, they're not exactly supposed to be right in the head. Like, it's okay. I'm glad that Darnell Wright has the competitive nature that when there's some random schmuck on Twitter like me saying, I don't think he can play left tackle, he's going to call me a dickbag. Good for him. I hope he does, I hope, because that's the type of mentality these guys got to have. I want him to win games. I want him to be the best offensive tackle he can be. But like, I don't think he's going to do that if he's like, well, maybe Joe Schmo 642 is right on Twitter. I should probably chill it playing left tackle. No, bro. I want him to have that mentality where he's going to go get that. So I think you're totally right, where it's like, I don't see the laziness. I think it's just, maybe it's the Bears hoping he slips and he ends up falling to this so they can try to move up for him or something like that. But he's going to end up being a top 25 pick, man. It's been so awesome to see his rise this year. And I truly don't know how it could be. I really think there's a chance he ends up being the first offensive tackle off the board this year.
Yeah. That's awesome, by the way. That's so cool, because we were very bold about it too at the time. We came on this podcast and I think we were like our little thing. If you go back and watch our tackles episode, it was off film. We would draft him as the number one tackle,
Yeah.
and that's what we said at that time. And then we had, yeah, that's what we had at that time. So if you want to go back and watch our offensive tackle episode, you can go do that. My big one, and the player ended up not working out that much, or so far hasn't worked out that much. But I literally remember tweeting one day, I said, everyone, I think I found a linebacker that nobody nobody has been paying attention to. And that guy ended up being Jamin Davis from Kentucky at that time.
Okay.
I need to go find that tweet. And I started hyping him up. I'm like, there's
He
no
ended
way
up going high.
Yeah, I was like, there's no way that this guy's like a fifth rounder. He's like 6'5". He's fast as hell. Of course, he only had that 1 year at Kentucky, like being a full-time starter at that point, which was the concern for him. But he was doing some really, really freaky stuff out there in pass coverage, coming up, read, react. And then he had the length to have like shed blocks. He wasn't all the way there at the time, but I was like, man, this guy would be a serious problem if the Broncos could get him in like the fourth round. Is my thoughts at the time. And then he ended up going first round.
Yeah, so he's still on the Commanders, I think, right? Or has he switched teams yet?
No, he's with the Commanders still.
Nice.
Jamin Davis, man. I hope he figures it all out. He was kind of raw coming out, but he is all-world talent. All-world talent. Like, there's only a handful of linebackers with as much, just that physically gifted as Jamin Davis was coming out of Kentucky, with the length, the speed. The length helps as a linebacker in so many different ways too. Side note, where you're getting in those windows in zone coverage, you're making those tackles, those shoelace tackles, all of that type of stuff. Well, let's move on to more. Zach Seegers asked this question, Frankie. He says, I love late day, the third day, undrafted free agent running backs. Who is your favorite running back this class that won't go before round 6?
Round 6. That gets kind of interesting. We're deep in the bag. I'll go. Yeah. So we already talked about Dwayne McBride a little bit, so I'm going to switch it up. I'm going to go Chris Rodriguez from Kentucky. He's another one of those guys that had a really solid senior year. A lot of carries throughout his career, but really big back who I just think runs the ball well. He's not the biggest athlete that you're going to see blow you away, but if you needed a back that I think could handle like 15, 20 carries a game for like 6, 7 games a season, towards the back half of a stretch, I believe in Chris Rodriguez. He'd probably be my pick. Just a really fun runner. He had a really good time at the Senior Bowl. Not really good time, but he had a very good week at the Senior Bowl. He probably had a very good time as well. I don't know. I'm not going to speak for him, but he's a player I like a lot, so he'd be one I'd be keeping my eye on. How about you?
Chris Rodriguez, if you're listening to the podcast, come tell us how your time was at the Senior Bowl. Come confirm. I'm going to just stick with Dwayne McBride. I think he's going to go earlier than round 6. But his concerns make it to the point where, I don't know, he could definitely fall, especially in this loaded running back class. Frankie, I am a big fan of Dwayne McBride as a 2-down running back. Now, here are his issues. Fumbles a ton. Massive, like huge fumbling issues there. It's because he's fighting for every yard.
Literally
available.
Fighting, throwing hands.
Throwing hands, one hand on the ball, punching with the other. No, but Dwayne McBride is a specimen too. He has breakaway speed. He has a lot of things going for him as a runner. Other issue, he probably just is a 2-down running back. He's not going to catch the football, or so far through college, he has not caught the football. Frankie, you said it earlier, but he has fumbled more than the amount of times he has caught a pass at UAB.
That's kind of an awesome stat. Like, he finished his career with that stat. Like, he could go on to be, and this is entirely possible, he could be an NFL Hall of Famer, and he can tell his kids, his grandkids, he'd be like, yeah, but I fumbled the ball more than I caught it in college.
Yeah.
That's a great feat.
Yes. It's a crazy stat. It's a nutso stat. It's also the reason why it's so concerning is because you can track fumbling numbers from college to the NFL, and that is something that translates. It doesn't seem like players really get better at it. Oh, yeah. It just seems like it's something you do or you don't do. Philip Lindsay didn't fumble in college. He doesn't fumble in the NFL. If there's Melvin Gordon fumbled at Wisconsin, he's fumbling in the NFL. It's something that just has translated. So it's something to worry about there. Most definitely. And it's scary. You never like guys that are going to turn the football over. Like, we literally were running Melvin Gordon out of Denver for doing that exact thing.
No, I mean, that's the thing too, is like, you don't, like, in the league, you do not get the chance to fumble many times before you're just straight up, you're out. Like, it's not happening anymore. It's not like, back in the 2000s where you'd see guys getting close to like double-digit fumbles. You outside of the quarterbacks, you put the ball on the ground like 3-4 times, you're leading the league or something, and it's got to be probably scary for those guys. I'll throw out one more guy. I'll go Muhammad Ibrahim, kind of following that trend of kind of two down backs. Something I think, like, you're going to find a lot of guys that already have a lot of tread on the tires, I think, that are going to end up slipping in this class. Ibrahim's another good example. Already has 800 carries in the tank. I'm assuming he's probably already like 23, 24 years old. So not a guy you're probably expecting to give a second contract to. But when you talk about a guy I think can come in year one, be an efficient runner for you, probably be really good in the red zone, really good on those third and short situations if you need a guy that can pick up a couple of yards. Bigger body in the backfield, kind of similar to Chris Rodriguez I was talking about before. We're just physical runner between the tackles, big weight on him, and he can finish when you need him to, and he's one of those guys who's going to be doing his best running, I think, in the first couple of years of his deal.
Mohamed Ibrahim, he's got a ton of carries in college, but as a day 3 guy, like, he's a great day 3 running back that could come in and be productive for your NFL team. I think without question, if Mohamed Ibrahim checked into a game, I wouldn't be like, oh, damn, like, who's our running back? I think he would do just fine, right?
He's a guy that would be an awesome option for Denver.
Yeah, he would be. Yeah. He would be very good for Denver. Bree Maestas, friend of the show, co-host of me, and on this exact same YouTube channel you are currently watching. I thought this was a really, really interesting question. Truthfully, I loved this question. How does the analysis of college players differ from your analysis of NFL players, and how do you account for the differences between the two levels of competition when reporting or covering them?
That is a great question. There's levels to that. I love it.
Isn't that a great question?
Do you want to go first, or should I go first?
I could go. You go
first.
Okay. I think she kind of nailed it. There's a huge difference just because you have to understand the level they are on, not just the competition, but the experience, right? What a college coach is teaching versus what an NFL coach is teaching. When you're in the NFL, that playbook, and people need to understand this, that playbook is huge compared to a college playbook. You don't have that much time in college you don't have everything. You have to pick up it. You're not going to stick around for the next 5 years. You are there for your time, and you might even leave early to the NFL. So that's something to keep in mind. Like, for example, we talked about it. Jalen Hyatt and Cedric Tillman don't have a great route tree. Why is that? Because they're playing in college football. That's the reason why we don't know if they can run certain routes or not. You know what I mean? So that's the big difference. And the thing that differentiates them is that there's a lot more projecting out of college for those exact reasons, because we haven't seen their full skill set. And because they're so much younger and newer to the football, you're projecting more at the college level than you are the NFL. There is some projection in the NFL, most definitely. Like, we're trying to project these second-year players when we talked about that starting off this show.
Yep.
But we have a clearer idea on them than we do to these college prospects. And that's what makes it so much fun at the same time, is you're projecting, you're figuring out who's good or not. There's the chance that shit blows up in your face. All that stuff is like so fun. That's what makes scouting college football the absolute best film watching, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, I just want to echo off of your point pretty much. Like, a big thing is just like in the NFL, I think you're looking for competency. You're looking for continual competency. And in the college game, you're looking for dominance a lot more, especially when you talk about a lot of these higher end prospects. And this is something I talk about a lot when I'm talking about trying to differentiate between, say, my, edge 2 or my edge 3. if it's a guy at, say, a smaller school, I want him to be kicking ass every single game. If he's going up against worse competition, if he's going up against guys that I think are going to be accountants in a couple of years, I want to see dominance. Whereas when I'm watching NFL film, if I'm seeing a guy play competently for 60 snaps week in and week out, that's probably a really good player. That's a very good player. That's a very valuable asset to have on your team. Whereas, again, when we're talking about, when you say projection, if I'm watching a guy, play in, a Big 12 game, he's going up against a few guys that, maybe we've all never heard of. And I'm watching him just kind of go about the motions for like 50, 60 snaps. Like, it's very hard for me to see that guy jumping to the next level where, again, it's just so difficult. And, when you're talking about like when you want to see dominance, there's so few guys in the NFL that play at a consistently dominant level that, like, we all know when it's happening. We all know who's doing it. It's not hard to identify that. Like, it's very hard to kind of project, oh man, this guy's dominating in college. What's he going to play like when he is not able to be as dominant? I think that's a really big part of it as well. When you're talking about, wow, this guy, when he's the best athlete on the field, is visibly the best football player. What happens when he's not the best athlete on the field? What happens when he's maybe the 10th best athlete on the field and he's now the youngest player on the field? What's that going to look like? That's such a big part of it as well, where, again, it's such a mind game. Such a big part of it is the mentality with these guys too. And I mean, such a big thing that, like, kind of gets thrown by the wayside a little bit as well is some guys get to the league and figure out things. They figure out their athletic regimen. They figure out better ways to put on weight and keep on weight. They figure out how to be healthy. They're around better environments. They're around veterans that are teaching them how to do stuff differently. And I mean, that's such an unseen part of it. That's so, like, can be very hard as the people that are trying to be like, oh, I think this guy's going to be good in the next level, because you don't necessarily know what situation they're going to go into and how they're going to respond to that situation. So that's such a little bit of an interesting part of it as well, is because, I mean, the draft is, at the end of the day, so much more of a guessing game, whereas the NFL, like, there's a level of, this guy already made it to the NFL and is already, like, quality, where when you're evaluating a guy, it's pretty easy to put him in a bucket of, like, very good enough to be on the field. This guy should probably be like a rotational backup player. That's pretty easy. Yeah. Whereas in the college game, there is such a bigger spectrum of player to, like, this guy should have stopped playing football after his junior year of high school. This guy is going to be in the Hall of Fame in the NFL in 2 years. And the first guy might be trying to tackle the second guy,
Yep. No, totally. I mean, at the end of the day, the big difference, I thought you said it perfectly. In the NFL, you are scouting finished product. You are sitting there trying to figure out how close you are to being just really good at football. It's as simple as that. Is you're scouting who's the best on the field. In college, you're looking towards the future. You're saying, who could be the best on the field, and why do I think they have a higher likelihood of being the best? You know what I mean? That's the big difference there. That's what makes college football scouting so much fun. That's what makes the NFL draft literally the best for me. I love watching college film, and I always want to try to make more time, especially this year, to watch college film, because it gets me super excited every single time I even talk about it. I love it. But Frankie, I think I'm going to sign out here. We have a ton more questions that we could have gone into without question, topics we could have gone into, but we're sitting at 53 minutes, and I think we covered a lot. So, Frankie, where can they find your amazing work, my man?
Go check me out over Frankie's Film on Twitter. I don't have a blue check mark because no one does anymore. Elon, you bastard. TikTok, I'm at Frankie's Film NFL. I post, like, my cut-ups over there. Once the draft happens, I'll be throwing up a lot more stuff for specific teams. Once the Broncos make all their selections, the second it happens, I will be deep in the cave throwing together whatever games I can find and whatever clips I can find of specific players. Watch me over there. Watch me over here every Thursday with Joey. Watch me also on the Irish NFL show. Yeah, LTB, we're going straight to the moon. We're also bringing Ireland with us. And, make sure you're following us. Drafts next week. So, we'll probably end up doing something for that. And then week after, it'll be all the post-draft content, giving you all our thoughts on what every team did and where everyone ended up going. Joey, where can they find your wonderful work?
Yes, everybody, please subscribe to the Let's Talk Broncos YouTube. That's probably where you're watching right now. If you're watching on Twitter, go do yourself a favor, subscribe, because it helps me a ton. If you like me in any shape or form, just go subscribe to it, click on my videos, and then click out. if you don't even like
Maybe
it. Just
like. You could leave a
help me
comment,
out.
too.
Leave a like, spread it, get it in the algorithm. Let's go. You know what I mean? Help me out. But send Zach and I money to go to the more Nuggets games. We're 2-0 when we're there. That's where you can find me, at the Denver Nuggets. But yeah, guys, until next time, go Broncos. Let's go.
Go Broncos, go Draft.